Ladies and gentlemen, there will be moments in your life when everything around you is loud, but the real battle is not in the noise outside. The real battle is in the quiet place between your thoughts. What you allow to live in your mind will determine how long you last in the storm. Does not break people first. The mind breaks first, and once the mind collapses, the body, the vision, and the faith soon follow. Resilience is not about avoiding pressure. It is about learning how to stand upright while pressure is trying to fold you in half. You do not become resilient by accident. You become resilient by discipline. Discipline is choosing structure when chaos feels easier. Discipline is deciding that your mind will not become a dumping ground for fear, doubt, regret, or distractions. Every setback comes with a voice. That voice says, quit now. Every delay whispers, you are wasting your time. Every failure tries to convince you that this is the end of your story. Resilience begins the moment you talk back to those voices and say, I am still standing and I am still becoming. Your mind must be trained to respond, not react. When adversity shows up unannounced, the undisciplined mind panics, but the disciplined mind pauses. It remembers what it has survived. It remembers who carried it through the last valley. It remembers that pressure does not cancel purpose. Discipline your mind to think beyond the moment. Pain is temporary, but the lessons it carries are permanent if you receive them correctly. Some struggles are not meant to destroy you. They are meant to sharpen you. They are forging strength you will need for the next level of your assignment. You cannot be resilient while feeding your mind constant negativity. What you listen to daily becomes what you believe eventually. Guard your mental gates. Be selective about what you replay, what you rehearse, and what you allow to shape your inner dialogue. You are not weak because you feel tired. You are only weak if you surrender your thoughts to despair. Resilience is built in repetition. Every day you wake up and choose discipline over comfort, clarity over confusion, and faith over fear, you reinforce mental strength. You are not just surviving, you are training. There will be days when discipline feels lonely, when doing the right thing brings no applause, when consistency feels invisible. But understand this, resilience grows quietly. Roots form underground before anything breaks the surface. What you are becoming cannot be rushed. Discipline your mind long enough, you will discover something powerful. Storms will still come, but they will not move you the way they used to. Criticism will still speak. It will no longer define you. Pressure will still press, but it will not crush you. Resilience is often misunderstood as a sudden surge of strength that appears when life becomes difficult. Many believe it is an emotion, something you either feel or do not feel in the moment of crisis. But resilience is not born out of emotion. Emotion is unstable. It rises and falls with circumstances. One day it is courage, the next day it is fear. One moment it is hope, the next moment it is exhaustion. If resilience depended on emotion, no one would survive prolonged pressure. True resilience is not what you feel. It is what you have trained your mind to do when your feelings are trying to take control. An emotional reaction responds instantly. Panics when things go wrong. It magnifies problems and minimizes possibilities. It asks, why is this happening to me? And quickly follows with, cannot handle this. Emotional reactions seek relief, not growth. They look for escape, not endurance. And while emotions are real and valid, they are poor leaders. If you allow emotion to sit in the driver's seat, it will always choose comfort over character and relief over responsibility. Mental discipline, on the other hand, is developed intentionally. It is built in the quiet, ordinary moments long before the storm arrives. Mental discipline is the ability to pause when everything inside you wants to react. It is the strength to think clearly when your heart is racing. It is the practice of choosing perspective over panic. A disciplined mind does not deny pain, but it refuses to let pain define the outcome. Resilience shows up when you have learned how to govern your thoughts. Life will test you in ways that feel unfair, unexpected, and overwhelming. Loss will knock on your door without warning. Failure will interrupt your plans. Disappointment will challenge your faith in yourself and in the future. In those moments, your emotions will scream loudly. They will demand attention. They will urge you to quit, to lash out, to shut down, or to give up. Resilience is the voice that rises above the noise and says, I will not make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. A disciplined mind understands that feelings are information, not instruction. They tell you that something matters, but they do not get to decide your response. Resilience is the ability to feel pain without becoming powerless. It is the ability to experience fear without surrendering to it. It is the ability to acknowledge weakness while still moving forward. This does not happen automatically. It happens through training. Mental discipline is built by repetition. Every time you choose to control your thoughts instead of letting them control you, you strengthen resilience. Every time you refuse to replay negative conversations, imagined failures, or worst-case scenarios, you reinforce mental endurance. Every time you choose patience over impulse, faith over fear, and clarity over confusion, you are teaching your mind how to survive pressure. Resilient people are not immune to breakdowns. They are not made of stone. They feel deeply. They hurt honestly. They do not live at the mercy of their emotions. They understand that emotions change, but principles remain. They anchor themselves in truth, purpose, and discipline rather than mood. When emotions say, stop, discipline says, rest, then continue. When emotions say, you are finished, discipline says, this is not the end of the story. One of the greatest threats to resilience is mental chaos. Undisciplined mind is crowded with distractions, comparisons, regrets, and fears. It is constantly reacting to external noise and internal pressure. In that environment, resilience cannot grow. Mental discipline creates order. It decides what deserves attention and what must be ignored. It filters thoughts instead of absorbing everything. It creates boundaries around the mind the same way strong people create boundaries around their time and energy. Resilience is also shaped by how you interpret adversity. An emotional reaction views hardship as punishment. A disciplined mind views it as preparation. Emotion asks, why me? Discipline asks, what is this teaching me? Emotion looks for someone to blame. Discipline looks for strength to develop. When your mind is trained, you begin to understand that pressure is not proof of failure. Often it is evidence of growth. There will be days when your emotions are exhausted before the day even begins, days when motivation is absent and confidence feels distant. On those days, resilience does not depend on how inspired you feel. It depends on the systems you have built. Discipline carries you when motivation disappears. Routine sustains you when enthusiasm fades. Commitment keeps you standing when feelings want to sit down. Mental discipline also requires honesty. You cannot discipline what you refuse to confront. Resilience grows when you acknowledge your weaknesses without being ashamed of them. It grows when you admit that you are tired but still willing, that you are afraid but still faithful, that you are uncertain but still committed. Disciplined mind does not pretend everything is fine. It simply refuses to surrender to despair. Over time, this discipline transforms you. You begin to notice that setbacks no longer derail you the way they once did. Criticism no longer defines you. Delays no longer discourage you. You still feel disappointment, but it does not destroy your direction. You still experience pressure, but it no longer paralyzes your progress. This is resilience at work, not as an emotion, but as a mindset. Resilience is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is quiet strength. It is the decision to get up again without needing validation. It is the choice to continue when no one is watching. It is the courage to stay disciplined when results are slow and recognition is absent. Emotional reactions seek immediate relief. Mental discipline seeks long-term transformation. In the end, resilience is not something you find in a moment of crisis. It is something you build daily in how you think, how you speak to yourself, and how you respond to pressure. When your mind is disciplined, adversity may shake you, but it will not break you. Circumstances may challenge you, but they will not define you. Because resilience, rooted in mental discipline, becomes more than a response. It becomes your identity. Long before the body gives up, the mind quietly surrenders. What looks like physical exhaustion is often mental defeat in disguise. People say they are tired, weak, or unable to continue. In many cases, the body still has strength left. The legs can still move. The hands can still work. The lungs can still breathe. It is the mind that has decided the effort is no longer worth it. The collapse begins internally, long before it becomes visible on the outside. The mind is the command center of the body. Every action begins as a thought before it becomes a movement. When the mind loses direction, the body loses momentum. When the mind becomes overwhelmed, the body follows with heaviness. When the mind believes the struggle is pointless, the body slows down and eventually stops. This is why two people can face the same pressure, the same workload, and the same adversity, yet respond in completely different ways. One continues forward while the other shuts down. The difference is not physical ability, it is mental endurance. Mental collapse does not happen suddenly. It is a gradual process. Begins with unchecked thoughts. Doubt enters quietly. Fear starts asking questions. Discouragement repeats itself until it feels like truth. The mind becomes crowded with what-ifs, regrets, comparisons, and worst-case scenarios. Over time, these thoughts wear down resolve. The body feels the weight of this mental burden and responds with fatigue, tension, and withdrawal. The body is reacting to what the mind has already accepted. Many people mistake emotional overwhelm for physical limitation. They say they cannot go on. What they really mean is that they no longer believe going on will make a difference. The moment belief collapses, energy drains. The moment hope weakens, effort feels pointless. The body was never the first to quit. It was simply obeying a discouraged mind. The mind collapses when it is untrained for pressure. Undisciplined mind reacts to difficulty as a threat rather than a challenge. It interprets struggle as a sign of failure instead of growth. It magnifies pain and minimizes progress. Under stress, it defaults to survival mode, seeking the fastest escape rather than the strongest response. When this happens repeatedly, resilience erodes, and the body becomes the messenger of mental defeat. This is why mental conditioning is more important than physical preparation alone. You can strengthen muscles, improve skills, and increase endurance. But if the mind is not prepared to withstand discomfort, fear, and uncertainty, those strengths will remain unused. The mind decides when effort stops. The body follows orders. If the mind says, this is too much, the body agrees. If the mind says, one more step, the body finds a way. Mental collapse often hides behind reasonable excuses. I'm burned out. I'm overwhelmed. I need a break. While rest is necessary and healthy, there is a difference between genuine rest and mental surrender. True rest restores strength. Mental collapse disguises itself as rest but produces avoidance, procrastination, and loss of purpose. The body stays still not because it needs recovery, but because the mind has lost resolve. Pressure exposes the condition of the mind. When life is smooth, mental weakness remains hidden. But when adversity arrives, cracks appear. The disciplined mind leans into pressure, searching for solutions. The collapsing mind resists pressure, searching for escape. One adapts, the other withdraws. This difference determines whether hardship becomes a turning point or a breaking point. The mind collapses when it is allowed to rehearse defeat. What you repeatedly tell yourself shapes your endurance. If the internal dialogue is filled with self-doubt, hopelessness, and negativity, the mind begins to believe that effort is useless. Over time, this belief drains physical energy. The body feels heavy, slow, resistant because the mind is convinced that movement no longer matters. Training the mind to endure is essential. This training happens daily, only in moments of crisis. It happens when you finish tasks you want to abandon, when you follow through on commitments even when motivation fades, when you push past discomfort instead of immediately seeking relief. Each of these moments strengthens the mind's capacity to remain engaged under stress. Mental collapse also occurs when perspective is lost, when the mind focuses only on the pain of the moment and forgets the bigger picture. Endurance weakens. Pain feels permanent, struggle feels endless. But a trained mind remembers that seasons change, that effort compounds. That progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Perspective keeps the mind from collapsing under temporary pressure. Cause of mental collapse is isolation. When people carry burdens alone, the mind becomes overwhelmed. Thoughts spiral without correction. Fears multiply without challenge. The body responds to this mental strain with tension and fatigue. Resilience grows when the mind is supported, encouraged, and reminded of truth. A strengthened mind can carry the body further than isolation ever could. When the mind is fortified, the body becomes capable of extraordinary endurance. History, faith, and human experience are filled with examples of individuals who continued despite hunger, pain, exhaustion, and loss. Their bodies did not possess supernatural strength. Their minds possessed unwavering resolve. They decided internally before they continued externally. Understanding that the mind collapses before the body ever does is empowering. It shifts responsibility inward without condemnation. It teaches that endurance is not only about physical capability, but about mental stewardship. What you allow to occupy your thoughts will determine how far you can go. When the mind is trained to stay present, focused, and hopeful, the body responds with strength. When the mind is guarded against despair, the body finds energy even in fatigue. When the mind refuses to quit, the body often surprises itself with what it can endure. In the end, strengthening the body without strengthening the mind creates fragile endurance. Strengthening the mind creates resilience that carries the body through pain, pressure, and uncertainty. The body may feel the strain. It is the mind that decides whether the journey continues. Life has a way of throwing storms at us without warning. Crises arrive unexpectedly, challenges appear suddenly, and pressure often lands with the force of a hurricane. In those moments, the human mind has two options: to panic or to respond. Panic is easy, instinctive, and immediate. It comes as a flood, a tidal wave of fear and confusion that can sweep away reason, clarity, and judgment. Response is deliberate, controlled, and requires training. Discipline is the bridge that teaches the mind to choose response over panic. Without discipline, becomes the default. With discipline, response becomes the habit. Panic is not just a mental state, it is a biological reaction. When danger presents itself, the mind floods the body with stress hormones. Heart rate accelerates, breathing quickens, muscles tense, ability to think logically diminishes. Panic wants immediate relief. It demands action without thought. Panic shouts, do something, move, escape, protect yourself. It creates a sense of urgency that overrides reason, and in many cases, people act based on fear rather than wisdom, making mistakes that could have been avoided with a calm, deliberate response. Discipline trains the mind to resist this instinct. Discipline teaches patience, trains the mind to pause, assess, and choose the next step intentionally rather than impulsively. A disciplined mind understands that pressure is not the enemy, it is the teacher. It knows that fear is not a signal to retreat, but a signal to prepare, to think, and to act with clarity. This training does not occur overnight. It happens slowly through repeated practice, consistent self-control, conscious decision to prioritize thought over emotion. When the mind is disciplined, the first response to difficulty changes. Instead of reacting in chaos, it begins with observation. The disciplined mind asks, what is happening? What can I control? What is the best course of action? This pause, though brief, is monumental. It is the difference between acting out of fear and acting with purpose. In the absence of discipline, this pause does not exist. Thoughts spiral, emotions flare. Decisions are made hastily, often worsening the situation rather than improving it. Discipline interrupts that spiral, giving the mind space to regain clarity. Consider everyday examples of pressure: a sudden argument, an unexpected financial crisis, an urgent work problem. These moments can cause panic if the mind is untrained. In panic, people shout blame and make impulsive choices. Disciplined mind takes a step back. It listens, analyzes, and formulates a plan. Discipline does not remove fear or discomfort. It equips the mind to navigate them without surrendering to chaos. It transforms fear from a master into a messenger, signaling where attention is needed rather than dictating rash decisions. Discipline is also about repetition. It is not enough to respond calmly once. The mind must be trained repeatedly to choose response over panic. This requires daily practice in small ways: controlling anger in traffic, managing frustration at work, remaining patient in line, or calming the mind when small setbacks occur. These small exercises build mental muscle. Over time, when true crises appear, the mind is not unfamiliar with calmness. It has practiced response in smaller, manageable ways. Discipline becomes a habit that strengthens under pressure rather than breaking under it. The mind's response is also shaped by perspective. Discipline trains the mind to see beyond the immediate chaos. It teaches the difference between what can be controlled and what cannot. Panic focuses solely on the immediate threat, exaggerating danger and minimizing resources. Discipline teaches assessment. It teaches what is under my control. What can I do right now? What steps will make the difference? By focusing on actionable steps, the mind converts energy from fear into solution-oriented thinking. Discipline also teaches emotional regulation. Panic thrives when emotions run unchecked. Anxiety escalates, stress compounds, and irrationality grows. Disciplined mind develops the capacity to recognize emotional reactions without being dominated by them. It acknowledges fear, sadness, frustration without allowing these feelings to dictate action. The mind learns that emotions are informative, not decisive. Response, therefore, becomes a conscious choice, measured, thoughtful, and constructive. A disciplined mind also understands preparation. Part of responding without panic is knowing in advance how to handle stress. When the mind has rehearsed challenges, learned strategies, and anticipated difficulties, panic finds less space to grow. Preparation gives the mind confidence. Confidence is the antidote to fear. The more disciplined your mind becomes, the more it can face the unexpected without surrendering to chaos. In other words, discipline builds resilience by reducing the element of surprise and strengthening mental composure. The long-term benefits of this training are profound. People who master the habit of responding instead of panicking live with greater clarity, purpose, and control. They are able to navigate crises without being derailed. Their decisions are informed rather than reactive. Their energy is conserved for meaningful action instead of dissipated in uncontrolled worry. They are able to recover from setbacks faster because their minds remain steady and focused even when circumstances are turbulent. It is important to note that discipline is not rigidity. Discipline does not mean suppressing emotions entirely or becoming detached from life's realities. It is the ability to experience emotion without letting it dictate action. It is the skill of maintaining rational thought in the presence of fear. It is the strength to weigh options, consider consequences, and then act intentionally. Panic, by contrast, is impulsive, uncontrolled, and reactionary. Discipline transforms instinctive panic into deliberate response. Developing this mental discipline requires self-awareness. The mind must recognize its own tendencies to panic. It must learn to identify early signs of emotional overwhelm and redirect thought patterns before chaos takes over. This requires honesty and persistence. Every failure, every moment of lost composure is an opportunity to refine discipline. Over time, the mind becomes increasingly resilient, able to withstand pressure without succumbing to panic. Ultimately, the difference between those who collapse under pressure and those who rise above it lies not in circumstance, intelligence, or talent, but in discipline. Discipline teaches the mind to pause when panic calls for immediate action. Discipline teaches the mind to analyze when fear urges irrationality. Discipline teaches the mind to plan when confusion wants to dictate. Discipline teaches the mind that response is always more powerful than reaction. When the mind is disciplined, life storms lose their power to destroy. Challenges still arise, difficulties still exist, and pressure will always test limits. Panic no longer controls the mind. Instead, a deliberate, measured, and composed response becomes the default. Discipline shapes the mind into a command center that operates with clarity even in chaos and strength even under pressure. In conclusion, panic is instinctive, but response is learned. It is learned through repetition, preparation, emotional regulation, perspective, and awareness. Discipline is the training ground where the mind practices responding instead of panicking. It is the quiet force that transforms fear into strategy, chaos into clarity, and reaction into deliberate action. When discipline governs the mind, panic loses its power and resilience becomes the natural outcome. The storms of life will not disappear, but the disciplined mind will stand firm, calm, and unwavering. And in that steadfastness, true victory is found not in avoiding pressure, but in mastering the mind to respond when panic demands to take control. Life has a way of testing us. It will place obstacles in our path, disappointments in our journey, and failures in our plans. Every setback is a moment where we are forced to confront not only external circumstances, but the internal dialogue that follows. For every setback, there is a voice. This voice whispers, sometimes gently, sometimes loudly, "You are not enough. This is too hard. You will never recover. You might as well give up." If left unchecked, this voice becomes the loudest sound in your life. It begins to dictate your decisions, shape your actions, and define your future. But here's the truth. Every setback carries a voice, and that voice must be challenged. When a setback occurs, it is natural for the mind to speak first. The human brain is wired to interpret obstacles as threats. It scans the environment for danger and magnifies every negative possibility. When plans fail, relationships fracture, opportunities slip away, or goals are delayed, the mind instantly reacts. It replays what went wrong. It questions self-worth. It measures the loss in permanent terms. And in this reaction, the voice of doubt grows louder, convincing you that failure is the conclusion rather than a step in the process. But setbacks are not the enemy. They are invitations to growth. The voice that accompanies them is not necessarily truth. It is interpretation. The first step in challenging this voice is recognition. Awareness is essential. You must recognize when the voice speaks. You must catch yourself in the act of internalizing failure. The moment you notice that the voice says, "You cannot do this," you gain the power to respond instead of obey. Recognition transforms passive suffering into active engagement. It allows you to separate the event from the narrative your mind is telling you about the event. Challenging the voice begins with questioning it. Every time the setback whispers discouragement, ask, is this true? Does this define my future? Have I overcome difficulty before? The voice will always attempt to generalize failure as permanence. It wants you to believe that one loss equates to eternal defeat, but reality is far more nuanced. The setbacks are chapters, not the entire story. Challenging the voice requires reminding yourself of previous victories, times you persevered when the odds were against you, and moments you were stronger than your fears. The voice of setbacks often disguises itself as reason. It convinces you that quitting is practical, surrender is logical, and that avoiding struggle is wise. But wisdom and fear are not the same. Discipline teaches us to discern between caution and surrender. To challenge the voice, you must develop a mindset that evaluates setbacks not as endpoints, but as lessons, as feedback, and as opportunities for growth. Each obstacle is a teacher. The voice accompanying it is a test of your resolve. Emotion complicates this process. Setbacks trigger frustration, disappointment, anger, and sadness. These emotions are real and valid, but if they are allowed to dominate, they strengthen the negative voice. Emotional reactions alone cannot be trusted as guidance. They amplify defeat and mask possibility. Challenging the voice requires emotional regulation, a conscious decision to feel without surrendering to the narrative that pain creates. When the mind is disciplined, emotions provide information, but the voice of doubt no longer commands action. Repetition and reinforcement are vital. The voice that accompanies setbacks will not yield easily. It has been rehearsing doubt for years, strengthened by fear, insecurity, and previous failures. Thrives in silence and isolation. This is why consistent mental practice is essential. Each time you consciously challenge discouraging thoughts, the voice weakens. Each time you choose to move forward despite the setback, the voice loses credibility. Discipline and persistence are the tools that transform internal dialogue from enemy to ally. Challenging the voice also requires perspective. Every setback must be seen in the context of the larger journey. Life is long, and setbacks are fleeting in comparison. One failure does not erase a lifetime of potential. One mistake does not define character. One disappointment does not dictate destiny. By stepping back, the mind can observe the setback objectively. It can separate emotion from fact, temporary defeat from permanent loss, and pain from purpose. Perspective gives clarity and diminishes the power of the negative voice. Accountability and support further strengthen this process. The voice of setbacks is strongest when it operates in isolation. Sharing struggles with trusted mentors, friends, advisors allows the mind to hear alternative perspectives. Others can challenge the voice, affirm truth, and provide evidence of resilience. External voices of encouragement align with internal discipline. The ability to confront and overcome setbacks grows exponentially. Challenging the voice also means taking deliberate action. A voice of defeat can only dominate if passivity allows it. The mind must act despite fear, hesitation, doubt. Every small step forward weakens the authority of the negative voice. Success, no matter how incremental, proves the voice wrong. Action generates momentum, and momentum gradually replaces the whispers of doubt with affirmations of capability. The act of moving, even in discomfort, teaches the mind that setbacks are not permanent and that progress is always possible. Faith in self and in purpose strengthens resilience against the voice of setbacks. Belief in one's capacity to adapt, grow, overcome is a shield against despair. When the mind trusts that setbacks are part of a meaningful process rather than meaningless punishment, the voice loses its power. Confidence is not arrogance, it is preparedness. Preparedness is cultivated through experience, reflection, and repeated confrontation with challenges. The disciplined mind internalizes these lessons and refuses to yield to discouragement. Ultimately, the voice that accompanies setbacks is a test of character, strength, and resolve. It will always be present. Life will never remove obstacles or challenges entirely, but it is not the existence of the voice that determines your trajectory. It is how you respond to it. Challenging the voice is an act of empowerment. It is the conscious refusal to let failure define identity. It is the decision to view difficulty as temporary, adversity as instructive, and setbacks as fuel for greater growth. When the mind is trained to confront the voice, setbacks no longer feel paralyzing. They become opportunities to prove resilience, courage, and determination. The voice that once whispered surrender becomes a background sound drowned out by discipline, clarity, and action. This transformation is not instantaneous. It is a process that requires patience, reflection, and deliberate effort. But over time, the mind becomes unshakable, no longer accepts the narrative of defeat. It chooses to rewrite the story with every setback faced, every doubt confronted, and every fear challenged. Every setback carries a voice, yes, but the voice does not have the final say. You do. The mind that is disciplined, aware, courageous will listen to the voice, discern its intent, and challenge it decisively. It will rise above panic, confusion, and self-doubt. It will find clarity where chaos seems to reign. It will take action where inaction seems easiest. The voice will speak, but the disciplined mind will respond. And in that response, resilience, strength, and victory are forged. Mental strength is not a sudden gift. It is not something that appears overnight in moments of crisis or under the pressure of necessity. True mental strength is forged slowly, quietly, intentionally through daily practice. It is built not in grand gestures, but in the small, consistent actions that repeat over time. The human mind is like a muscle. The more it is exercised, the stronger it becomes. And just as physical muscles are developed through repeated effort, resistance and discipline, mental strength is developed through daily consistency, through the repeated practice of resilience, focus, and self-control. Consistency is the secret that separates those who endure from those who break under pressure. One moment of courage, one day of discipline, 1 hour of focused effort does not create lasting mental fortitude. True strength is cumulative. It grows when effort is applied repeatedly, habits are formed, and when the mind is trained to respond positively under pressure over and over again. Each day becomes a building block. Each small action, each intentional choice adds weight to the foundation of mental strength. The danger of inconsistency is that it conditions the mind to surrender when difficulty arises. Without daily practice, the mind becomes reactive rather than proactive. It becomes dependent on motivation, inspiration, or external circumstances. When life is smooth and easy, this may not appear as a problem. But when setbacks occur, the undisciplined mind is caught off guard. It has never been trained to withstand discomfort, disappointment, or delayed gratification. It panics at the first sign of resistance because it has not built resilience into its daily routine. Daily consistency is not glamorous. It often goes unnoticed, unrewarded, and uncelebrated. But it is in the repetition of small, deliberate actions that mental strength grows. Reading a little each day, journaling thoughts and reflections, practicing patience, exercising self-control, maintaining focus on goals, and cultivating healthy habits, these these small disciplines accumulate, they build endurance. They reinforce the belief that progress is achieved through persistence, not luck. They train the mind to stay committed when distractions, temptations, obstacles attempt to divert attention. Mental strength through consistency is also about reliability. The mind learns to trust itself. When you consistently make choices aligned with your goals, you teach yourself that you can endure difficulty. You teach yourself that you are capable of following through. You create a pattern of action that reinforces confidence and diminishes doubt. Confidence is not born in moments of triumph alone. It is forged in the repetition of effort. When no one is watching, when motivation is absent, when success seems distant. Consistency teaches resilience because it normalizes discomfort. Life will never be free of challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. Daily practice allows the mind to experience small struggles regularly, giving it the chance to learn that discomfort is temporary and manageable. The more the mind practices facing difficulty consistently, the less it fears it. The mind learns that pressure is not an enemy, but a teacher. It understands that persistence, repeated daily effort, commitment are what turn obstacles into opportunities for growth. Another dimension of mental strength developed through daily consistency is focus. The mind, like a muscle, can be trained to stay on task, ignore distractions, and prioritize what is important. Daily habits, whether studying, working, exercising, reflecting, teach the mind how to concentrate over extended periods. This ability to focus becomes crucial when unexpected challenges arise. Disciplined mind can allocate attention effectively, make better decisions, and respond strategically rather than reactively. This is the essence of strength. Clarity of thought in the midst of chaos. Consistency also reinforces self-discipline. Each day that you make choices aligned with your values, goals, and principles reinforces the mind's ability to resist impulsive reactions, fleeting emotions, and destructive habits. It teaches patience, delayed gratification, and control. Mental strength does not thrive in a mind that seeks constant comfort, instant reward, or immediate recognition. Thrives in a mind that has learned through daily practice how to stay steadfast, grounded, and intentional even when circumstances are difficult or discouraging. The cumulative effect of daily consistency is profound. At first, impact may feel small or imperceptible. Progress is gradual. Results may not be immediately visible, but over weeks, months, and years, the effects compound. Mental resilience increases, focus deepens, confidence grows. The mind begins to anticipate challenges and respond with preparation rather than panic. Mind begins to trust itself and its capacity to endure. Strength, once fragile and dependent on mood or circumstance, becomes unshakable. Daily consistency also teaches accountability. When you commit to small, repeated actions, you hold yourself responsible for your own development. You stop blaming external circumstances for weakness and start owning the process of growth. Accountability reinforces mental toughness because it creates internal standards that are maintained regardless of external validation. It is not about pleasing others or proving anything to the world. It is about proving to yourself that your mind can remain disciplined, focused, and resilient. Mental strength through daily consistency also fosters adaptability. Life is unpredictable and challenges often arrive unexpectedly. The mind trained through repetition knows that difficulty is part of the process. It has practiced adjustment, perseverance, problem solving in small ways every day. When a crisis emerges, the mind does not collapse under pressure because it has already rehearsed persistence. Consistency trains the mind to handle both routine and unexpected stress with composure. In addition, daily practice builds endurance. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, repeated mental effort strengthens resilience, patience, and perseverance. The mind learns that temporary discomfort is a necessary part of growth. It learns that small, persistent effort outweighs sporadic bursts of intensity. Mental strength, therefore, is less about what can be achieved in a single moment and more about what can be sustained over time. Mind that is trained consistently is prepared to endure long periods of challenge without giving in to despair. Finally, mental strength through daily consistency creates identity. The mind begins to see itself as disciplined, resilient, and capable. Strength becomes not just a response to circumstances, but a part of who you are. Habits shape character, and character shapes destiny. The small actions practiced consistently build a mental framework that withstands setbacks, absorbs pressure, and recovers quickly from failure. Mind becomes a fortress reinforced by the cumulative effects of daily discipline. In conclusion, mental strength is not born in a single moment of courage. Is it a gift given in by circumstances? It is earned through daily, deliberate effort. Each day of focused discipline and perseverance strengthens the mind, trains resilience, and builds confidence. Daily consistency teaches the mind to endure discomfort, resist impulsive reactions, maintain focus, and respond effectively under pressure. It transforms weakness into strength, doubt into confidence, and fear into strategic action. Mental strength is forged through daily consistency. Setbacks no longer break you. Pressure no longer intimidates you. Life's challenges do not overwhelm you. Instead, your mind, trained through repetition and discipline, responds with clarity, composure, unwavering strength. True mental strength is not a fleeting moment of heroism. It is the result of a lifetime of small, intentional actions performed consistently until resilience becomes second nature. The mind is a garden. Whatever you plant, nurture, and feed will grow. Just as a garden cannot produce fruit if it is filled with weeds, the human mind cannot cultivate strength, clarity, purpose if it is cluttered with harmful input. What you consume mentally, your thoughts, your information, your conversations, even your distractions, directly shapes what you believe and ultimately how you respond to life. The mind is not a passive observer. It is an active participant, constantly processing, interpreting, and forming beliefs based on the input it receives. If you fill it with negativity, doubt, or fear, those elements become part of your reality. If you fill it with truth, hope, and discipline, your perspective and your resilience are strengthened. Mental consumption begins with the information we allow into our lives. Every day, we are bombarded with messages, opinions, stories, and images. Social media scrolls, news cycles, conversations, and entertainment. All of these are forms of mental intake. If your mind is constantly exposed to content that reinforces fear, insecurity, and despair, it begins to accept these as truths. Repeated exposure shapes belief systems subtly over time until the mind no longer questions negativity. The opposite is also true. Consistent exposure to constructive, motivating, and affirming content nurtures belief in possibility, resilience, and personal power. What you consume mentally also includes the inner dialogue you allow. Every thought you think is a form of nourishment. When your mind rehearses self-doubt, fear of failure, or imagined worst-case scenarios, you are feeding negativity into the subconscious. These repeated patterns of thinking shape belief, reinforcing doubt and weakness. Conversely, intentional thoughts of discipline, courage, gratitude, and purpose feed mental resilience. Daily repetition of these thoughts strengthens conviction, rewires neural pathways, and builds a mind that believes in its ability to overcome challenges. Mental consumption is therefore not just about external information, it is about the quality of your internal dialogue. Habits of attention matter profoundly. The mind can only focus on a limited number of inputs at a time. What you choose to dwell on becomes your default belief system. If your attention is habitually captured by criticism, comparison, and negativity, your mind begins to believe that life is hostile, unfair, and limited. If your attention is consistently directed towards solutions, possibilities, and learning, your mind begins to believe that growth, success, resilience are possible. Attention shapes perception. Perception shapes belief. Belief shapes action. What you consume mentally is therefore not harmless. It is the architect of your reality. Relationships also constitute mental intake. The people you engage with regularly influence what you believe about yourself, others, and about life in general. If your circle is dominated by doubt, cynicism, or fear, your mind internalizes those patterns. Words have weight. Opinions have power. Conversations shape attitudes, and repeated exposure to negative mindsets erodes confidence and narrows perspective. On the other hand, relationships that encourage discipline, growth, and resilience feed belief in potential, capability, and purpose. Your environment does not just influence your mood, it shapes your mind and your core beliefs. Mental consumption shapes belief in subtle, cumulative ways. It is rarely the loud moments or dramatic influences that determine worldview. Instead, it is the repeated, seemingly small exposures, the repeated scrolling, the repeated conversations, the repeated thoughts that quietly build conviction. Beliefs are formed in these repetitions, gradually solidifying into patterns that define how you interpret challenges, setbacks, and opportunities. A mind fed with discouragement will anticipate failure. A mind fed with encouragement will anticipate success. Challenging, harmful mental consumption requires vigilance. The mind is often unaware of what it is absorbing. Passive consumption, watching, listening, scrolling without reflection, can seed doubt without conscious awareness. It is essential to curate what enters the mind deliberately. This may mean limiting exposure to negative media, avoiding gossip, and minimizing engagement with fear-driven narratives. May also mean deliberately seeking sources of inspiration, knowledge, and truth that align with growth and resilience. Mental intake is not accidental, must be chosen with purpose. Discipline plays a crucial role in shaping what you consume mentally. The mind is naturally drawn to sensationalism, shortcuts, instant gratification. It is easier to scroll endlessly through distractions than to invest in content that builds long-term resilience. Discipline teaches the mind to resist what is harmful and to invest in what is constructive. It prioritizes long-term growth over short-term entertainment. It recognizes that every thought, every word absorbed, and every story consumed has the potential to shape beliefs. Consistency in this practice strengthens conviction, rewires the mind, and reinforces resilience. Mental consumption also affects belief through language. The words you hear and read shape how you think about yourself and the world. Repeated exposure to defeatist language, harsh criticism, negative labels cultivates beliefs of limitation. Conversely, affirming language, purposeful conversation, constructive storytelling cultivate beliefs of potential. Belief is not abstract. It is built in the patterns of thought reinforced by the words and ideas consistently absorbed. Feed your mind with language that builds, teaches, and empowers, and your beliefs will align with resilience. The mind is also influenced by mental consumption in the form of models and examples. Stories of people who overcame adversity, who persevered in the face of setbacks, and who built greatness through consistent effort provide templates for belief. Exposure to role models teaches the mind what is possible. Conversely, constant exposure to cynicism, despair, or complacency teaches the mind that limitation is inevitable. Belief is a mirror. What you see repeatedly shapes what you internalize as possible. Carefully selecting models and examples for the mind to study is therefore a critical component of cultivating resilient belief. Beliefs shaped by mental consumption affect every area of life. They determine how challenges are faced, how opportunities are pursued, and how setbacks are interpreted. A mind that has absorbed fear and negativity interprets adversity as insurmountable, success as unlikely, and effort as futile. A mind that has absorbed growth, resilience, and purpose interprets adversity as temporary, success as attainable, and effort as meaningful. Thoughts and input the mind receives daily create the framework for how life is experienced. What you consume mentally is therefore not passive. It is active, powerful, and decisive. Intentional mental consumption also builds mental immunity. Just as the body strengthens when exposed to controlled stress, the mind strengthens when exposed constructive, challenging, and empowering content. Reading, listening, reflecting, and engaging with ideas that stretch understanding, promote discipline, and encourage perseverance trains the mind to respond rather than react. Over time, the mind learns to reject unhelpful narratives, ignore distractions, and focus on what aligns with purpose. The beliefs cultivated through this process provide stability even in the midst of chaos. In conclusion, what you consume mentally determines what you believe. Beliefs are not arbitrary. They are cultivated in the garden of the mind, fed by thoughts, conversations, media, relationships, and experiences. Negative, fear-driven, or passive mental intake fosters doubt, weakness, and limitation. Intentional, disciplined, and constructive mental intake cultivates resilience, courage, and clarity. The mind cannot be strengthened by chance. It must be fed wisely and consistently if you wish to remain strong, decisive, and resilient in the face of life challenges. Guard your mental diet as carefully as you guard your physical health. Feed it with truth, wisdom, inspiration. Remove toxicity, negativity, and distraction. Over time, your beliefs will reflect what you have consistently consumed. A mind fed with strength, purpose, and clarity will believe in resilience. A mind that is disciplined in its mental intake will respond to setbacks with courage, not fear. What you consume mentally does more than inform your thoughts. It defines your reality, shapes your destiny, determines the heights to which your life can rise. Pain is inevitable. It comes to everyone at different times, in different ways, and with varying intensity. Some pain is physical, some emotional, some spiritual, and some mental. Life delivers challenges that are uncomfortable, situations that are discouraging, losses that feel unbearable, and moments that test the very core of who we are. It is natural to recoil from pain, wish it away, to hope it never arrives. But pain, as unwelcome as it may be, is not always a signal of defeat. Pain can either destroy you or sharpen you. It is not the existence of suffering that determines your outcome. It is the way your mind responds, the way your spirit interprets, and the way your purpose channels the experience. Pain, when processed with intentionality and discipline, becomes a tool for refinement, resilience, and growth. Pain has a way of revealing what matters. It exposes priorities, weaknesses, and hidden strengths. When life hurts, it forces attention on areas of neglect, choices that were misaligned, or behaviors that require change. This revelation can be uncomfortable, but it is instructive. Pain strips away illusions, distractions, and complacency. It uncovers truths that were previously hidden under comfort or convenience. When approached with the right mindset, pain sharpens perception. It makes the mind and heart more discerning. It forces you to confront reality rather than avoid it. In this way, pain becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. Pain also has the capacity to cultivate resilience. The human spirit, when confronted with challenges repeatedly, learns endurance. Each painful experience is like a weight lifted in a gym. It strains, it challenges, it stretches, but it strengthens. Mental and emotional endurance are developed not in the absence of difficulty, but through repeated exposure to it. Pain teaches patience, perseverance, persistence. It forces the mind to keep moving even when the body or emotions beg to stop. Those who understand that pain is a sharpening tool rather than a destructive force harness it to grow stronger, wiser, and more capable. Purpose and pain are intimately connected. Without challenge, purpose can remain abstract or dormant. Comfort rarely ignites motivation at its deepest level. Pain, however, creates a tension that demands response. When life hurts, it asks questions. What are you here to do? Who are you becoming through the struggle? How will you respond to difficulty without surrendering? Pain can clarify priorities by forcing the mind to evaluate what truly matters. The sharper the pain, clearer the purpose can become if one chooses to interpret suffering as a catalyst rather than a curse. The mind plays a critical role in this process. Pain in itself is neutral. It is a signal, a sensation, an event. What determines its effect is the interpretation. The undisciplined mind allows pain to generate despair, fear, and paralysis. It magnifies the difficulty and convinces the spirit that hope is lost. But the disciplined mind sees pain as information. It asks, what is this teaching me? How can I use this to become better? How can this challenge refine my character and strengthen my resolve? When processed with this intentional approach, pain sharpens purpose by transforming suffering into insight and insight into action. Growth rarely occurs in the absence of discomfort. Comfort zones are safe, predictable, and often stagnant. Pain pushes boundaries. It challenges assumptions, habits, and patterns that no longer serve you. It exposes limitations and highlights areas for improvement. The individual who fears pain may stagnate, but the one who embraces it with intention can evolve. Pain then becomes a sculptor. It chips away what is weak, irrelevant, or false, leaving behind clarity, resilience, and focus. This is the paradox of suffering. What feels destructive in the moment can be the forge of strength for the future. Experiences of failure, rejection, or loss are forms of pain that sharpen purpose. Every failure teaches what does not work. Every rejection reveals the limits of dependence on external approval. Every loss forces a reevaluation of values, priorities, and strategies. When these experiences are reflected upon, they provide wisdom that success alone cannot. Pain motivates introspection. It demands learning. It forces recalibration. Purpose grows in these moments because clarity emerges. The mind and spirit have an endured struggle. Begin to define a path forward with greater intentionality and precision. Pain also cultivates empathy and leadership. The individual who has suffered and emerged stronger develops an understanding of the human experience that cannot be gained from comfort alone. Pain teaches humility, compassion, and patience. It sharpens purpose, not just for personal gain, but for the capacity to influence and guide others. Purpose becomes intertwined with responsibility. Pain refines character, and character is the foundation of meaningful purpose. Discipline is critical in ensuring that pain sharpens rather than destroys. Without discipline, the mind can become consumed by bitterness, resentment, or despair. The spirit may surrender to hopelessness, and the body may follow with withdrawal or apathy. Discipline trains the mind to focus on growth, to seek lessons, and to maintain faith despite adversity. Daily habits of reflection, self-control, intentional action reinforce the ability to use pain as a tool. Discipline transforms suffering from a potential derailment into a catalyst for deliberate action. Time and perspective also matter. Pain in the moment often feels overwhelming, unmanageable, and permanent. But when viewed with time, its lessons become clear. The sharpness of pain emerges in hindsight when the individual can see how struggle led to strength, how adversity built resilience, and how challenge illuminated true priorities. The ability to reflect and extract meaning from suffering is a skill cultivated through consistent practice of self-awareness and mental discipline. Finally, pain sharpens purpose because it forces action. When life hurts, staying passive rarely resolves the challenge. Purpose is realized when the mind and spirit channel pain into decisions, strategies, and behaviors that align with long-term goals. Pain is an amplifier. It heightens awareness, increases urgency, and clarifies priorities. Those who allow it to sharpen purpose take deliberate steps forward, even in discomfort. They translate adversity into momentum, weakness into strength, and struggle into wisdom. In conclusion, pain is inevitable. Destruction is optional. Pain can break, but it can also refine. It can be endured in despair, or it can be harnessed to sharpen purpose. The difference lies in the mind, the spirit, and the choices made in response. Pain teaches, strengthens, and clarifies. It exposes weaknesses to be corrected, challenges to be overcome, and priorities to be realigned. The individual who understands this transforms suffering into a tool for growth. Purpose emerges from struggle, resilience is built in adversity, and character is forged in discomfort. Pain does not have to destroy you. It can sharpen you, focusing your mind, aligning your heart, and directing your life toward what truly matters. Those who master this truth discover that no hardship is wasted, no difficulty is meaningless, and no suffering is permanent. Pain, when faced with discipline, reflection, and intentionality, becomes a weapon for personal growth and a catalyst for fulfillment. Resilience is not loud. It does not announce itself with grand gestures or flashy displays. It is rarely born in moments of public recognition or dramatic heroism. True resilience is quiet, it is subtle, consistent, and steady. It is forged in the small, repeated actions that are often unseen, uncelebrated, and unnoticed by anyone but the person cultivating it. Just as steel is strengthened in the furnace by repeated heating and cooling, resilience is strengthened through repetition, through the daily, intentional practice of endurance, discipline, and mental fortitude. The quiet, persistent effort that is repeated day after day becomes the foundation upon which a life of resilience is built. Many people misunderstand resilience. They think it is a sudden strength that appears when life becomes difficult. They imagine moments of crisis, moments of despair, or moments of pressure as the proving ground. But resilience does not emerge spontaneously. It is the cumulative result of countless small decisions repeated over time that prepare the mind, body, and spirit to endure. Each decision to persist when it is uncomfortable, to keep showing up when motivation fades, and to act when emotion urges inaction is like a brick laid quietly in the structure of resilience. The repetition may feel mundane, but it is monumental in its effect. Repetition is the key to turning action into habit. Habits are powerful because they reduce reliance on willpower alone. When resilience becomes habitual, it is no longer dependent on circumstances, mood, energy levels. You no longer wait for motivation to feel capable. You no longer hope for inspiration to act. The repeated practice of discipline, focus, persistence ingrains strength into the very fabric of your character. Over time, resilience becomes automatic. It becomes a quiet inner force that carries you through adversity without fanfare or hesitation. Consider the daily routines that shape character. Early, showing up consistently to work, exercising the mind and body, maintaining focus on goals, practicing patience, reflecting on progress, and choosing integrity over convenience. These may seem ordinary, even trivial, when taken one day at a time, but when repeated consistently, they accumulate into unshakable resilience. Small actions performed with consistency compound into strength. Repetition is the engine that transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary capacity. Resilience through repetition also teaches the mind to withstand discomfort. Life is rarely easy and challenges are inevitable. The mind that is accustomed to facing small discomforts repeatedly is prepared to face larger ones when they arise. Repetition conditions the mind to stay steady under pressure, to act decisively despite fear, and to continue even when results are delayed. Each repeated act of endurance trains the mind, body, and spirit to resist the urge to surrender. It develops patience and cultivates fortitude. This is why the quiet work of repetition is more powerful than any dramatic moment of courage. Resilience is built in preparation, not in panic. The process of repetition is also transformative because it normalizes effort. Struggle, persistence, challenge become familiar companions rather than intimidating strangers. When the mind is repeatedly exposed to discomfort, failure, and resistance in manageable ways, it learns that difficulty is temporary and effort is permanent. The repeated experience of rising after small setbacks trains the mind to rise after large ones. Resilience is therefore cumulative. Each small repetition adds strength, and each challenge survived reinforces the belief that one can endure future challenges. Repetition also shapes mindset. The human brain is remarkably responsive to repeated input. Thoughts, behaviors, and experiences that are repeated frequently become reinforced neural pathways. These pathways define how the mind responds to adversity. If the mind repeatedly practices fear, avoidance, or giving up, it becomes wired for weakness. But if it repeatedly practices discipline, focus, and perseverance, it becomes wired for resilience. Quiet, repeated actions reprogram the mind for strength, clarity, and endurance. Consistency and repetition teaches self-trust. The more you practice facing challenges, the more you trust your ability to respond to them. Each repeated effort, no matter how small, is a vote of confidence in yourself. You are proving to your own mind and spirit that you can endure, that you can overcome, and that you can persist. Over time, this trust becomes unshakable. When unexpected challenges arise, the mind does not panic because it has been trained to respond through repeated practice. The foundation of resilience is therefore laid in the quiet confidence built through repetition. Repetition also fosters patience. Resilience is not about immediate results. It is about enduring discomfort for long-term benefit. Repeated practice teaches the mind that success is a process, not an event. Progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Each small, repeated action builds strength that cannot be measured in a single day, becomes evident over weeks, months, and years. Patience is strengthened through repetition because the mind learns that persistence is more powerful than instant gratification. Quiet nature of resilience built through repetition also cultivates humility. It teaches that strength is not always visible to others, that endurance does not require recognition or applause. The repeated acts of showing up, practicing discipline, persisting in unseen moments create inner fortitude. Resilience becomes internalized, a private power that does not rely on external validation. Mind learns to value growth over recognition, process over results, and persistence over performance. Finally, repetition instills a sense of inevitability and success. The mind that practices consistent effort begins to anticipate triumph, not because life is always fair or easy, because repeated practice has proven capability. When resilience has been built quietly, systematically, and intentionally through repeated action, the mind trusts that no obstacle is insurmountable, no setback is permanent, and no challenge is greater than the accumulated strength developed through consistent effort. Repetition creates certainty, builds the invisible armor of confidence that cannot be shaken by circumstances. In conclusion, resilience is not born in grand moments of heroism or crisis. It is built quietly through repetition, day after day, moment after moment, choice after choice. Small, consistent actions compound into mental strength. Discipline, patience, and focus are reinforced through repetition. The mind learns endurance, the spirit learns fortitude, and the body learns persistence. Repetition transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary resilience. When resilience is built quietly through repetition, life's storms lose their ability to destroy. Challenges may still arrive, setbacks may still occur, pressure may still test limits, but the foundation of resilience is unshakable. The quiet work done daily, repeated consistently, ensures that the mind and spirit can endure, adapt, and overcome. Strength becomes habitual, courage becomes instinctive, and resilience becomes a natural part of who you are. Path to unshakable resilience is not glamorous, but it is effective. It is quiet, it is persistent, and it is built one repeated action at a time. Pressure is an unavoidable part of life. It comes in many forms: deadlines that loom like mountains, responsibilities that pile up, relationships that strain under tension, unexpected challenges that appear without warning. Pressure tests every aspect of a person's being: the mind, the body, the spirit. Many falter under its weight. Some crumble when confronted with the intensity of expectations, setbacks, or hardship. Others, however, remain unshaken. The difference is not circumstance, talent, or luck. The difference is discipline. A disciplined mind is a fortress impervious to panic, composed under stress, and steady in the midst of chaos. It does not waver when pressure intensifies, does not surrender when life demands more than seems possible. Discipline is what trains the mind to hold firm when everything around it feels unstable. To understand why a disciplined mind remains unshaken, we must first recognize what happens when the mind is undisciplined. Undisciplined mind is like a ship without a rudder. At the first sign of a storm, it sways, drifts, and risks capsizing. Thoughts race uncontrollably. Fear dictates action. Decisions are made impulsively, often worsen the situation. Anxiety rises, panic spreads, and the body follows suit, reflecting the chaos of the mind. When pressure arrives, an undisciplined mind reacts instead of responds. It obeys instinct instead of reason. It allows fear to dominate judgment. And in that reaction, opportunities are lost, mistakes multiply, and confidence diminishes. Discipline changes everything. Discipline is not merely about control or suppression. It is about training the mind to respond intentionally, to act thoughtfully, to maintain clarity under strain. A disciplined mind has rehearsed adversity long before it arrives. It has cultivated habits of focus, patience, perspective. It has practiced the art of responding rather than reacting. Just as an athlete trains for a high-stakes competition, a disciplined mind prepares for the storms of life. Pressure may increase, but the disciplined mind has already been conditioned to withstand it. It has rehearsed composure, resilience, and strategic thinking until they become second nature. One of the primary ways a disciplined mind remains unshaken is through control over thought. The mind under pressure is prone to chaos, imagining worst-case scenarios, magnifying problems, and amplifying fear. Discipline teaches the mind to recognize these destructive thought patterns and redirect them toward constructive thinking. It cultivates awareness, allowing an individual to pause, reflect, and evaluate rather than react impulsively. A disciplined mind understands that thoughts are tools, not tyrants, can assess the situation objectively, consider options, and respond strategically. Pressure becomes manageable because the mind has the ability to govern itself even when external circumstances are overwhelming. Perspective is another key element. A disciplined mind sees challenges as temporary and problems as solvable. It understands that pressure is often a test, not a judgment. When adversity arrives, the disciplined mind frames it as an opportunity to grow, learn, and strengthen character. This perspective reduces the weight of pressure. What might overwhelm an undisciplined mind becomes a challenge to approach thoughtfully. Discipline teaches the mind to measure problems proportionally, to separate what is within one's control from what is not, and to focus energy on actionable steps rather than futile worry. Consistency builds resilience under pressure. A disciplined mind practices control, focus, deliberate action daily, not just in times of crisis. This repetition strengthens mental muscles and builds confidence. When a difficult situation arises, the mind draws on its training. It does not panic because it has faced smaller pressures consistently over time and learned that persistence produces results. Discipline makes resilience habitual. It is the cumulative effect of repeated, intentional practice that allows the mind to remain steady when the stakes are high. Emotional regulation is another critical function of a disciplined mind. Pressure often triggers strong emotions, fear, frustration, anger, or despair. These emotions are natural, but without discipline, they can dictate action, cloud judgment, and weaken resolve. A disciplined mind recognizes emotions without being controlled by them. It allows feelings to exist without letting them dictate behavior. Fear becomes a signal, not a dictator. Frustration becomes information, not paralysis. Discipline strengthens the mind's ability to process emotion intelligently, maintaining composure even in the face of intense stress. The disciplined mind is also proactive, not reactive. It anticipates challenges and prepares for them in advance. It does not wait for crisis to dictate behavior. Instead, it has cultivated systems, habits, and mental frameworks that allow it to respond efficiently and effectively when pressure arrives. Preparation reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is a primary source of stress. The disciplined mind mitigates chaos before it begins, remaining unshaken because it has rehearsed, planned, and structured its responses long before the storm hits. Patience is another gift of discipline. Pressure often demands immediate results, but the disciplined mind understands that meaningful progress takes time. It resists the temptation to rush, panic, hasty decisions. Instead, it acts with calculated step, maintaining focus on the long-term goal. This patience ensures that pressure does not distort judgment and that decisions are aligned with purpose rather than impulse. Over time, consistent practice of patience under small pressures prepares the mind to endure larger ones without faltering. Discipline also cultivates inner confidence. The more the mind practices focus, control, and intentionality, the more it trusts its ability to navigate challenges. Confidence is not arrogance. It is trust in preparation, skill, and clarity of thought. Pressure may rise, but the disciplined mind knows that it has the capacity to endure, adapt, and overcome. This trust is built quietly through daily practice, reflection, and consistent decision-making. It is the inner knowledge that, no matter the circumstances, the mind can remain steadfast. Finally, a disciplined mind understands purpose. When pressure threatens to overwhelm, the disciplined mind recalls why it is acting, what it is striving for, and what is at stake. Purpose provides direction and focus, anchoring the mind in reality rather than chaos. It transforms stress into motivation, adversity into determination, and challenge into opportunity. The disciplined mind is unshaken because it is guided by principles, goals, and conviction that transcend temporary pressure. In conclusion, pressure will always come. It is a constant in life. Some crumble, falter, and lose their way when faced with stress. Others endure, adapt, and thrive. The difference lies in discipline. A disciplined mind remains unshaken under pressure because it has trained itself to respond thoughtfully, control thoughts, regulate emotions, act consistently, anticipate challenges, maintain patience, build confidence, and anchor itself in purpose. Resilience is cultivated quietly, daily, and intentionally. It is strengthened by repetition, reflection, and focus. A disciplined mind does not surrender to fear or confusion, meets pressure with clarity, courage, and determination. Strength is not the absence of pressure. It is the presence of discipline. When the mind is disciplined, no storm, no challenge, and no crisis can shake the foundation of your character, resolve, or purpose.